Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 117. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Friday, Steelers Nation. 6 days until day one of the 2023 NFL Draft. And so we are getting ready here with our last minute draft profiles and mock drafts and predictions and discussions. And that includes a draft roundtable we'll have a bit later in the show with Jonathan Heitritter, Josh Carney, Tom Mead, and Joe Clark. So about ready to get this whole thing done, taken care of, and ready for the draft, Dave.
Happy Friday, and things will be a lot different next Friday, won't they?
Definitely.
So we're really about to shift focus here and start learning more about this 2023 Steelers class, and just an exciting time. And looking, I say this every year, man. We come out of the season, and obviously you and I are behind on draft prospects, and really I don't start really getting to know a lot of these kids until Senior Bowl time. But when I look back every time at this time of year, I think, man, I've been able to learn so much about this class, and thankfully we've got these guys doing the draft profiles which helps speed that up. And obviously we've had guys at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and the Combine and things like that. It's just it amazes me how much you can cram into just a couple of months with this prospect, with these prospects, especially with we both watch college football throughout the season, but we don't dive deep into the tape or learn a lot more about these guys until actually the Steelers season ends. So it's just amazing, because we had the long roundtable, another roundtable discussion today with some of the guys. It just amazes me how much, how far we've come in just a short matter of time.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, that back in January, just a couple of months ago, I felt so unsettled, didn't really feel confident or comfortable in these names. And now I just a total 180. And just by the way here, not super relevant to Pittsburgh, but some huge news coming in here just as we began the podcast here this Friday. According to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, the NFL has suspended 5 players, headlined by Lions wide receiver and former first-round pick Jameson Williams, for violations of the NFL gambling policy. He's now been suspended indefinitely, at least a year. Or wait, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, he's
it might
5
be 6
games.
6 games, okay, yeah. The tweet is not worded all that well, but Williams suspended 6 games.
Ian Rappaport may have participated in 420 days.
A little bit, yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, Williams 6 games. And then I think Quentin Cephas is a year. I don't know. This tweet is actually really hard to read, but point is there are some big suspensions being handed down by the NFL.
Yeah, for gambling violations as well too. So boy, and all those are Lions players, right?
And then there's Commanders Shaka Toney as well. So I think it looks like 4 Lions and a Commanders player. All
right, interesting news here to start off a Friday. I wonder what that does to their draft plans. Maybe I wonder if they've known these are coming.
They probably had some suspicion, I imagine. For how long, I don't quite know, but I imagine this is not going to be news to them as it is news to us. So, Dave, the Allen Robinson trade has been finalized, officially announced by the Steelers today. I know that took a couple of days for the physical to happen and probably him, sign the contract and everything to become officially official. But the Robinson deal is done. It does seem to come with some sort of maybe contractual wrinkle or change to it. But you can kind of outline what that might mean and what that might not mean.
Yeah, and once again, we joked about Ian Rappaport and the wording of his tweets last night. He broke the news on this. It's just the wording of it makes it kind of hard to decipher there. Long story short, and I think Adam Schefter kind of gave us more clarification. I think what Ian was doing was rounding down and for the general public, rounding down in numbers is fine. But for people that lose sleep over it like I do, it drives you absolutely crazy. But it sounds like that the Rams are paying a total of $10.25 million of what Robinson was scheduled to earn in 2023. Now, let me clarify that even more. He was scheduled to earn a $10 million base salary in 2023, along with a $5.25 million roster bonus. Originally, I thought that roster bonus was due to him in March and thus already paid by the Rams. But I went back and looked late last night. I don't think there was a March date tied to that. So, I think to confirm that up is it didn't matter anyway, because all $15.25 million of what Robinson was scheduled to earn in 2023 was guaranteed. So it sounds like what the Rams did is they probably took that $10.25 million and gave it to Robinson right before the trade, as part of a signing bonus to lower his base salary down to $5 million, so that the Steelers could accommodate that over on their side in a trade there. So he arrives to this, visualize this, he arrives to the Steelers with a $5 million base salary in 2023 period. From there, it sounds like, and I threw this out on Twitter a couple of days ago. I didn't think Omar would do this, but it sounds like by the wording, this is what happened. You know, he's under contract technically for this year plus 3 more years, with 2 of those being void years. It sounds like what they did is they are lowering Robinson's base salary down from $5 million to $1.165 million, giving him the rest of that $5 million, which is $3.835 million, in form of a signing bonus. And while we don't know for sure, because it's not stated yet, I'm willing to bet that they've taken that $3.835 million signing bonus and then filled it in over the 4 years as far as proration goes. That would make sense to do that, because in turn that would lower Robinson's 2023 cap charge down to $2.12375 million overall. Now, in doing that, obviously you set yourself up for potential dead money, next offseason there. But it would help you better accommodate Robinson on a lower cap charge versus $5 million overall. Now, once again, do we know this is fact? No. And shame on me for doing my cap update yesterday and assuming that the early numbers that were thrown out were going to stick. But we'll find out in a couple of days once this thing hits the NFLPA. But it does sound like Omar utilized the extra years in Robinson's contract, 2 of which are void, to stretch out this signing bonus here. Now, it would make sense to do that, once again, by lowering his cap charge. So we'll find out. Nothing's really changed as far as how much the Steelers are assuming into 2023. It's just the fact that it looks like they might be lowering his cap charge once he arrives via what is essentially a restructure here. Now, here's the other thing that gets confusing here when it comes to Ian Rappaport's tweet.
Right.
He has 2024. Robinson now has a $10 million base, down from $15 million. Well, the way that over the cap already had previously Robinson's contract laid out, he already had a $10 million base. However, he had a $5.75 million roster bonus due in March of 2024. Now, none of that 2024 money is guaranteed. The big question, which we'll find out for sure in a couple of days, is what happened to that $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024? Did it indeed come over as part of the deal? I doubt seriously the Rams paid money, an extra $5.75 million, to get rid of them, because it would have made sense if you're going to pay them all that money to just keep them, as part of that. So I think the big question now, here's the other thing that's plausible, I guess, is did they go to Allen Robinson and say, look, the Steelers have issue with that $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024. If we cut you and we don't trade you, it's going to go away. Now, how bad do you want to go to Pittsburgh? Are you willing to erase that $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024 to move specifically to Pittsburgh, or do you want us to just cut you and it goes away automatically there? So the wording of Rappaport's tweet here, and we have not seen anything to clarify this, I don't think, out of any of the other mainstream media guys, is what exactly happened to the 2024 structure. I will say this: if somehow that $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024 went away as part of this deal, and they would have to get Robinson to sign off on this, obviously, here. But if it did go away, it makes this deal even that much more fantastic on the Steelers side, because of the fact that it now gives Robinson a fighter's chance to stay past 2023, because at that point his base salary would be $10 million, and that would be all that's due to him in total here. So once again, we're talking about a lot of things that we don't know here overall, but the way that Rappaport's tweet is worded here, I think opens up at least the discussion of what happened. What does it mean? What happened to the $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024? Because I doubt seriously that the Rams paid it. Was it just erased in the language as part of this, or is the whole thing just going to carry over in Ian's just very, very bad reporting on his part?
Okay, so the options in terms of the possibilities of where that roster bonus went is either it's still there and the report is just somehow incorrect, or it was negotiated where Pittsburgh said, we're going to take that roster bonus out. Robinson agrees to it as part of the trade of him coming over from Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yeah. I would think that the Rams would have to negotiate that on their side.
Okay.
Because once he got to Pittsburgh, he could say, nah, I'm not going to do it.
Right. But as part of the whole agreement and as the negotiation happened, I'm sure Pittsburgh was wanting that to be confirmed before the trade became official.
Right. And once again, that $5.75 million in 2024 roster bonus would have went away had he been cut outright, right? Because all of his contracts just eliminated there at that point. So I think it's plausible that maybe they went to him and say, how bad do you want to go to Pittsburgh? Because look, all of his 2023 money was guaranteed, right? So he was going to get that cut or not. It just might be, and I guess the incentive there would be, we'll trade. That's the only way that Pittsburgh will take you to this overall as part of this deal. They're not going to sign you if we cut you outright. Too much minutia involved there at that point. Do you want to go to Pittsburgh? And if so, are you willing to eliminate that roster bonus in 2024? Right. It's just pure speculation on my part based on the way that Ian Rappaport worded this tweet. So we'll have to see. But it does indeed sound like they did lower his cap charge down just to a little bit, like $2.12375 million in 2023 by utilizing the 4 years in his contract We won't know for sure until this hits the NFLPA, which unfortunately the deal was just made official this morning. It won't hit the sheet until tonight. And then we won't probably find out specifics until like Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of next week.
So for going back to the roster bonus, the incentive for Robinson to agree to that is A, if he wanted to come to Pittsburgh, obviously, and B, I guess it also keeps that 2024 base salary there. So if he does have, say, an unbelievably good season, then theoretically he may get that money in 2024. So that would be the carrot to convince Robinson to do away with that roster bonus, because had he been cut, whatever contract he would have gotten from any team's not going to have a $10 million base salary in 2024, I would imagine.
Correct. And then there's I don't know how the offset language is in that versus what the Rams would be guaranteed to pay and what a new team would pay and how much that would offset the Rams payment and all like that. That's a whole different podcast there. But I would think that, just as you worded there, I would think that the incentive would be that, because look, the Steelers aren't going to pay him no matter how good he would really have to have a good season for him to even think about lasting past March of 2024, because that's the timetable that's tagged with the $5.75 million roster bonus there.
Right.
So the incentive would be for him to eliminate that and still give him an opportunity to earn $10 million in 2024 if he has a good season with Pittsburgh in 2023. That's the only logical explanation that I would have for him eliminating the $5.75 million roster bonus in March of 2024.
And to be clear, the odds of him being a Steeler under those terms next year are still low, but it does increase those odds at least ever so slightly that this team would not have to make a decision as early with, obviously guaranteed roster bonus money. So it does bring those odds from, 2% to 5% or whatever number you want to put to it. And that would be the reason to get Robinson to agree to this.
Right. And here's the other thing. If you only have the $10 million base that you're dealing with him, and when it comes to 2024 money, and that's a big if once again, and let's say he goes out and has, 50 catches for 650 yards and 6 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, well, he's worth that 10 million. Well, you still have those unavoidable years in there, right? So what you could do if you were in a salary cap situation is you could restructure it again, take as much as that $10 million that you want to turning into a signing bonus and lower his 2024 cap charge, right? So,
yeah, it starts loading up the dead money, but you're right. It's an option if you want to utilize it.
Whereas if he had $15.75 million on the books in 2024, with $5.75 of that being due in March, or a decision being made in March, odds are he's not going to survive March.
Sure. Is there a precedent for this? Because I know obviously, with Vance McDonald's contract, the Steelers like to take out some of these incentives. I know this is not an incentive, and Pittsburgh has done a lot of roster bonuses in some of the contracts that it has, but is there any sort of precedent based on a team, the Steelers getting rid of a roster bonus as they acquire a player before?
Not that I remember in recent history, as long as I've been paying more and more closer attention to this overall, no. Now, they did work out the McDonald per game roster bonuses, but it was after a couple years, after a year or two that he was in Pittsburgh already,
Okay. It was in that second year, I guess, that first full year they had redone that contract, I guess.
Right. Either was the first full year I don't remember exactly, okay. But it did not happen initially when he came over. No, there. And this circles us back to the whole thing is, boy, kudos if indeed this happened with them using those void years that were already in place there as a mean to lower his cap charge. Well, it shows that Omar is at least open to being creative like that past the COVID year,
Sure, because our thought was, $5 million, the Rams were eating most of that money, but that's still, a fair amount of money for Pittsburgh to carry this year with not a lot of cap flexibility. And so if they're trying to creatively, let's get Robinson and basically have minimal a minimal cap charge against him, that's going to free us up to do other things or not have to do other things in terms of restructuring, although they probably still will, but just again, giving you that additional cap flexibility. Right.
So the big question, there's two questions we need to answer by the middle of next week is A, did they indeed turn that, are they indeed going to stretch that 3 point whatever million of a signing bonus given to them now over the course of the four total years? And the other thing is what happened to that $5.75 million roster bonus in 2024?
Right. So just to be clear one last time, the base salary, we know that has not changed. There's no way the base salary was reduced from 15 to 10 because the base salary was 10 prior to the trade. There's a roster bonus in there, and that seems to be the crux of the issue that we're trying to figure out.
In 2024, yeah. To my understanding, the base salary in 2024 was already $10 million, but there was a $5.75 million roster bonus that was due in March of 2024. And that's why the Ian Rappaport stuff and him saying that the Rams paid $10 million total. Actually, they paid $10.25 million total of the 2023 money he was due.
Okay, he might have just been rounding there, but yeah, point taken.
Which drives me crazy.
I know it does. So overall, again, basically a similar reaction before, but very. I always kind of hesitate to say low risk, but I guess it is appropriate to say, low risk Pittsburgh, not giving up much here and kind of getting things done the way that they want to get things done to acquire a guy in Robinson who we agree can still play in this league. Right.
I'm sorry to use up 17 minutes of time talking about all this, but this is important stuff that I pay attention to.
And you and Matthew were having a great conversation. And I saw you were getting frustrated, and I was just kind of the innocent bystander watching it all fly by.
I'm surprised I had the sleep score that I had last night.
It was good? I figured it'd be in the negatives.
It was a 79 sleep score last night, if you can believe it, which is pretty damn good for me. The
Dave Bryant's draft stock on the rise here in this last process. So happy to hear that. We'll get it figured out by Tuesday, and we'll come back probably hopefully for Wednesday's show and be able to give you guys all the clarification there. So back to the NFL draft here. And again, we'll go to our draft roundtable discussion here in just a couple of moments. But an article that I've been meaning to write about, this is a couple days old at this point, but I read it and I said, I want to write about this, just hadn't gotten the time. And so I finally wrote it for Friday. Tony Paulini, one of my favorite draft analysts, insiders for Pro Football Network, has really been on the bandwagon and very adamant and convinced Pittsburgh will be drafting a center sooner than later. And Pittsburgh's had interest in some of the interior offensive linemen, and he's really been connecting Pittsburgh to, I think, two names in particular in the latest article he had written, in John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota and Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin. Now, Michael Schmitz came in for a visit. We've kind of had those dots connected for a bit now. Tippmann we've heard less of, but he's a really good athlete and somebody that I think Pittsburgh would certainly be interested in. And so, again, I know it's draft season. It's rumor mill season. We'll get our answers here soon enough, but that was notable considering how, just over-the-top adamant Pauline has been in that article and other articles he's written as well about Pittsburgh having interest in a center.
Boy, coming out, and we mentioned this during our roundtable discussion, coming out of last season, not many people probably would have given much credence to the thought of the Steelers drafting a center, especially in the first 4 rounds of the 2023 draft. But as this whole pre-draft process has run its course here, it really does seem plausible that they'll draft a center within the first 4 rounds this year.
Yeah, it's not just the sole fact that they're going to draft a center. Something later, day 3 would make sense. You're not sure who the backup is with J.C. Hassenauer in New York with the Giants, but is it going to be, a 32-49 type scenario, higher than maybe what people think after you add Sayamalu and you add Herbig, and those are, of course, guards. They played center a bit in the past, but you felt like Cole was steady in the middle. So, again, it's the thing I've talked about so much. I've really wrestled with, my brain saying this team doesn't really need a high-end center at 32 or 49, but also just the evidence of Pittsburgh has shown a lot of interest there. And so what do you make of all that? We'll find out. But Have you watched Tippmann at all? I've watched him a little bit.
Not enough. I
Okay.
probably before. I tell you what, I'll make it a goal to cram in 3 full games of his by Monday, and let's revisit a discussion on him on Monday.
Okay, yeah. The skinny on Tippmann is that he's a really pretty tall center. Dude's like 6'5", 6'6", but a great athlete who can pull work in space. And of course, you play at Wisconsin, you're going to be able to run block. So that's the story on Joe Tippmann. But I just wanted to pass that along because Pauline's a guy that I look towards a lot, and he's really made mention quite a few times about Pittsburgh looking at a center.
Okay.
All right, what else do we have here, Dave? Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett bulking up, according to his personal quarterback coach, who was on 93.7 The Fan yesterday. Pickett's now about 226 pounds, ended last year about 213, so adding 13 pounds of all good muscle, good weight, according to his coach. And so I think they're calling him Kenny Thicket for 2023.
You said it before I could. No, look, he looks great. I think he looks great. And obviously he as part of, and I think his quarterback coach talked about, Rasiopi talked about this, the pre-draft process and, making sure, doing the things for the combine and all like that. And then, getting into the season, just the whole, everything that comes with the draft process and all like that. And, he talked about, what I think early in the offseason about wanting to work and add a little bit of, muscle to him and all like that. I think he looks great overall, and hopefully this will, help lend itself to any durability concerns with him. It shouldn't impact his mobility or anything like that. He's just a body metamorphosis of coming into the NFL and everything that goes along with that. Maybe, hopefully the arm strengths maybe improved a little bit and all like that. I think Tony talked about how, having a year under his belt and knowing what the Steelers expect, the type of throws in the offense that he can make, they can really hyper focus in on that, and the routes and the timing and Tony's talked quite a bit about the footwork aspect of Kenny Pickett this offseason. I think Kenny has talked a little bit about that as well too. So he's doing all the things that you would hope to see that your second year quarterback would do during the off season after his rookie season. So we'll just wait to see what the finished product is overall here, but best shape of his life.
We're in that season. We're in the best shape of your life season, but it seems true for Pickett. And you're right. Kenny Pickett's a worker. Like, this dude just, dedicates time to getting better at his craft and putting in the effort. And that's that does not guarantee he's going to become the next, franchise star quarterback, but it's a really good place to start. It's a really solid foundation that basically 98% of all the great quarterbacks have had that great work ethic, dedication. And I think just for year one to year two, that focused intensity. I'm a Steeler. I'm the starting quarterback. I know exactly what's expected of me and how things should go and how things should look compared to a year ago when you have no idea what team you're going to go to, no idea what situation, what system you're going to be dropped into. If you're going to start, be a backup, compete, no earthly idea. And so just to go from year one to year two to focus on football, not on my pro day script and combine stuff and interviews, and just focusing on being the best quarterback you can be. To me, that is why you see those guys make that jump so often from year one to year number two.
And look, the maturity aspect with him coming out was never in question. The leadership, all like that. The guy easily checked all those boxes. But now this is his team. Now this is his offense. He's assumed that position. Got all the guys down there in Florida and stuff like that. All the boxes that you'd want him to check when it comes to an off-season process after his rookie season are checked now, in my opinion. And we'll just see what this brings on the field now.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think he'll make a jump. I think a lot of these young guys, such a young offense last year, you'll see Pickett and others make that year number 2 jump. I do want to mention, just going back to the draft, the last profile I'm going to do, the last player profile I'll post, is a guy that you had mentioned a while back, and I didn't give it much mind. I didn't know much about the guy. I was watching his tape last night, City So from Eastern Michigan, and I'll give you a little teaser. It'll kind of segue into our next conversation. City So checks every single box what Pittsburgh looks for when it comes to interior offensive linemen. And he played left tackle early in his Eastern Michigan career, finished it out at left guard, highly experienced, 54 career starts. This dude's a mauler in the run game, like his torque, his power, displacement. Like, he does a great job in the run game. He's got good size, has good length, and he's not a great athlete in the open field, but this guy's got burst off the ball. Like, he's not a slow-footed type of guy in terms of getting out of his stance. And so I was watching his tape late last night against Arizona State, for example. This guy's going to be a talent.
Yeah, I think so. And we talked about early in this, several weeks ago, about this guard class and yada yada, especially when it came to true left guards, right?
Right.
Or correct, I should say. Because look, I also like John Gaines out of UCLA, but he's I think predominantly been a right guard. He's another guy to watch in this guard class. But I think City So, when it comes to true left guards in this class, and not talking about the tackles that might move over and that kind of stuff, and obviously on the heels of Voorhees going down like that, this guy's going to probably end up going, I don't know, 3rd, 4th round, because he is that good and because he is a true left guard, and probably one of, if not the top 2 or 3 left guards in his class now, I think. And
I remember you saying you didn't love Gaines' tape as much as you thought you would, right? And I know the testing is great, but the actual tape was not quite as impressive. Yeah, but look, I think a team's still going to get a great find with him wherever he goes, 4th, 5th, 6th round or whatnot. Just maybe not as high as what I originally thought when I went back and did a deeper dive on him. Remember, he's a guy too that's played up and down. He's got some center in his small package of center reps in his repertoire. I think even one left tackle snap. Just one snap. Oh, really? Yeah, but he's played a handful at right tackle, obviously both of the guard positions, and a little center as well too. So if you get into that 4th or 5th round, and not necessarily the Steelers, but any team in general, I think John Gaines is going to look real attractive to you as a guy that can push maybe some of the offensive linemen ahead of him in camp, and maybe even outright win a job. Great leadership. I was there I think 5 years at UCLA, and it seems to be an ultra clean prospect across the board. Leadership, captaincy, and I think even his it's been a while ago I put out there, but if you look at his short shuttle time, it was A+. Yeah. When you look at it, you look at the previous drafted guards that have had his short shuttle time or lower. It's a short list, but damn, it's impressive. Yeah, there's a really strong, what's the number, like 4.45 or better in the short shuttle for interior alignment? If you're below that, the correlation between that and NFL success is really strong. Yeah, it's like super. Let me see if I can find that tweet real quick here I had on him. And while you do that, I'll leave another teaser here. John Gaines missing only one category, one box away in our what they look for study. That was the bench, only 19 reps on the bench press, but he hit in every other category. So yeah, certainly a name to watch, and the testing is all there. But I did want to mention because I felt like this is a guy with good tape, and his testing was really impressive as well, considering the body type and the frame. Yeah, I'm having problems finding that tweet on him here. Maybe I didn't tweet it out, but I think maybe we talked about it on a podcast or something like that. But it was really amazing when you look back at the list of the players that had, or guards specifically, I think, that were drafted that had a short shuttle time of at least his or quicker. Not that I'm saying it's a bad thing, but the number of, like, to use your phrase, of true guards that have been just guards in their career, it's a very short list. Even Gaines, I guess, isn't technically been a guard his whole career. So was not a guard his whole career. He was left tackle his freshman season. Like, I'm just trying to think of how many guys were actually just a guard. I think it's Osiris Torrance, and maybe just Osiris Torrance.
What was Voorhees? Did Voorhees?
No, he's played tackle too.
Okay.
He's played guard and tackle. Yeah, and Avilia's played center and guard. And so, I guess Shawn Michael Schmitz has been a center, not a guard, but he was like one spot his whole career. So, I mean, again, versatility, I'm not saying these are bad things, but just it is kind of funny to sit there and say, how many true guards there are. It's a pretty short list.
Okay.
And that kind of leads into our what they look for study. The latest one that we did, just a couple of these left, but the latest one posted on Steelers Depot was the edge class. And Dave, to be honest, I thought there would be more edge rushers for us to talk about. Only one of them checked every single box, and it's not really even a great edge rusher, not really a fit in Pittsburgh. It's and of course it's a name that I'm going to struggle to pronounce, but Tomey, the edge rusher from Northwestern, who's probably going to be more of an interior type lineman in the NFL. So he was the only guy to check every single box with that really freaky workout that he had at the combine. So I thought there would be other edge rushers who hit all those notes, but he was the only one.
And who was close?
Yeah, one box away, there were a couple names. Baldonado from Pitt just missed in the 40 time. Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame missed in the 3-cone. Thomas and Kuhn from Central Michigan, one of my kind of day 3 guys, missed in the vert. O'Shawn Mathis from Nebraska, 40 time. And a guy you talked about, a guy we'll talk about in the roundtable, Byron Young from Tennessee, short shuttle because he did not participate. But Young's got some other concerns in his game and overall profile.
And look, I mean, based on Byron Young's tape alone, I'm willing to hit it. If he would have ran that short shuttle, I'm willing to bet he would have hit it.
Yeah, he had a really good workout. I imagine he would have been just fine.
Now they haven't seemed to show much interest in him, and he is a little bit older of a prospect and all like that. That Baldonado's an interesting guy as well too. Obviously, right there in Pitt's backyard. I think played mostly with his hand in the dirt, right? And but I mean, if you're going to consider a guy like Uzama out of North Kansas State, then you have to, I think, consider Baldonado as a potential later round guy.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of size and some length and good testing overall. So that's probably a name. And I think Incoom's a bigger, kind of heavier handed type edge rusher. And you're talking maybe, late day 3 type candidate with him.
That Adebawore is going to be an interesting guy to watch once he gets into the NFL, because man, he can get after the quarterback, and he moved up and down on that Northwestern line. It's just, from a measurable fit, he's an oddball,
Yeah, again, he's not really an edge. I put him on the list just to be as inclusive as possible, but he's not going to be a Pittsburgh Steelers 3-4 outside linebacker. I don't know exactly where's he going to go. I mean,
right.
he might end up being a first round pick, but just kind of the fit and who's going to want to try to figure out how to best use him. But the talent is certainly off the charts, so that'll be a really interesting name to watch just for the draft overall, not just for Pittsburgh, but just watching it as a fan to see where this guy's go. He could go anywhere from 10 to 35. I mean, I really don't know where he'll actually end up.
I think you can even open up the window all the way down to 50 potentially with him, because he is such an odd fit. Now he held his own at the Senior Bowl, man.
Oh, he had a great week. Yeah.
I mean, just overall, but I mean, 6'1" and 5'8", 282. I mean, you're getting into that Cansey talk as well too, when you're talking about a guy kind of that size there.
But he has length, like 34-inch arms, which is absurd for the height, because Cansey's really short. He's T-Rexy.
You just don't you might find guys with measurables across the board like him, but do they have the tape that impresses you? And Adebawore does. So it's going to be, we neither one of us think he's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, but it will be interesting to see where he lands, how he's used, and how he goes about his NFL career.
Yeah, his measurables, it feels like an error, like somebody made a mistake and put two players together. 6'0", 282, 34-inch arms, 27 on the bench, 4'49", 40 time, 1.55, 10 split. 37.5-inch vertical, 10.5 broad, 7.133 cone. Like, this is the testing in the frame, they just don't seem to match at all, but that's a hyper freaky athlete. And if a team can figure out how he wins in their system, then he's going to be a really good player.
It's like they gave him 7 pounds too much and
right.
And 3 inches not enough, because
right, exactly.
If this guy was 6'4", 270,
he's like a top 5 pick.
I mean, just from a measurable standpoint, he becomes the kind of a Planet Theory guy almost to because of the vert, because of the broad, because of the short shuttle and three cone, and the tape is awesome on top of him. So yeah, we haven't talked a lot about him because just not thinking he's a fit, but he's going to be interesting to watch.
For sure. All right, Dave, without further ado, let's get to our part 2 of the Steelers Depot 2023 NFL Draft Roundtable discussion, joined by Josh Carney, Joe Clark, Jonathan Heitritter, and Tom Mead. Just over an hour getting their thoughts on this draft class, Steelers team needs, and who might be the pick at number 17. We'll take a pause and come back with the roundtable. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, part 2 of our Steelers Depot 2023 NFL Draft Roundtable. Had the 4 guys on 2 weeks ago, and we'll have 4 more of the Steelers Depot crew on today. They are Tom Mead, Jonathan Heitritter, Josh Carney, and Joe Clark, all names I know you guys have heard from before, and we're really excited to have these guys on again to get their last-minute thoughts on the 2023 NFL Draft and in the direction the Pittsburgh Steelers may go. Jonathan, I'll start with you since we just kind of had this conversation before we began to record, and I want to get the other guys' thoughts as well. But, big debate at 17, not only the, obviously the player, the individual name, but the position, the positional value. This year, it's much harder to predict and map than, quarterback was last year, running back, and Najee Harris was in 2021. So you made the comment about, deciding between what's more valuable, offensive tackle or corner, it's a deep cornerback class. How do you weigh that when it comes to, do you not take that guy at 17, take him at 32 or 49? So just kind of give me your thought process in terms of, how you're juggling potentially the positional value of what to take at pick 17.
Yeah, I think that when you look at pick 17 and you look at, say, offensive tackle and corner, which are what most people are going to see as the Pittsburgh Steelers' top needs, I think you look at the names that are associated with those relative positions. Well, if you have a guy like Paris Johnson Jr. or Broderick Jones that are considered the top of the cream of the crop of the offensive tackle class, should they fall to that point at 17, I think that's when, you get the run the card up scenario potentially from Pittsburgh. But other than that, I mean, you have guys like Darnell Wright, who many analysts are considering possibly the number 1 offensive tackle in this class. For some people, DeJuan Jones, Anton Harrison, with Wright being more of like that mid to late 1, maybe early day 2, but like Jones being more probably late 1 to early 2, and then Harrison and likewise in that same respect. I think when you look at the offensive tackle class relative to the corner class, where obviously you have Witherspoon and Gonzalez, who should be gone off the board before 17, but then you have like the guys that Pittsburgh has shown a lot of interest in, Joey Porter Jr., Deonte Banks. You have like guys like Julius Brents and Keely Ringo that are probably more day 2 type players. I think it's just relative to that position. If they have a guy that is in mind that they don't think that they can get at 32 compared to the other guys on their board, I think that that's where they'll go if they don't have a guy like Jones or a Johnson Jr. available at offensive tackle. So for me, I look at it in the sense of, with corner, I think that it's probably a 2-man race at 17, whether if it be Porter or Banks. And then if that's not the case and they go offensive tackle, I think that it would be one of probably Darnell Wright or maybe DeJuan Jones there, maybe Harrison, but he feels like more of a 32 pick. So for me, I kind of lump those 3 tackles together and then those 2 corners together. So if you feel like you have that grade or that tier of the tackles and you feel like one of those 3 tackles is going to be available to you at 32, especially a guy like Anton Harrison, where it's a lot less of a projection compared to, say, the right tackles with Wright and possibly DeJuan Jones, where you draft them. Okay, do you move Chukwuma Okorafor over to left tackle, make Dan more the swing guy, or do you just draft Anton Harrison, younger, has more upside, is a more like proven, polished prospect when it comes to pass protection. He can go ahead and possibly supplant Dan Moore Jr. year one, or at least just push him in camp. There's a lot less moving parts there, which is important for the continuity of an offensive line. So for me, and you'll kind of see this when we make our predictions later, I am kind of hedging toward the fact of probably it being corner, unless they have their mind made up of like an offensive tackle, or say one of those two corners that they really want in terms of Banks or Porter off the boards.
Josh, how do you view this potential first round offensive tackle class? You know, Johnson not looking like he'll be there. Broderick Jones, I think maybe the odds are increasing he could be there. Darnell Wright's in this conversation. You know, Dawan Jones potentially, although we're not entirely sure how Pittsburgh feels about him after it appears that a scheduled and reported visit did not take place. So just give me your thoughts on the tackles in terms of the options at 17.
Yeah, I really think with this tackle class, there's the big four. I'm still putting Northwestern's Peter Skoronski in that tackle position, even though I do think he obviously will shift to guard at some point in his career. But you kind of mentioned the names. There's Paris Johnson, there's Broderick Jones, Darnell Wright. You can put those four in any order, and I think I'd be comfortable with whatever you came up with. But at 17, I really think, just based off of, you know, what we've seen with mock drafts and a lot of what we heard, I think your two options are going to be Broderick Jones and Darnell Wright. I would be stunned if Dawan Jones finds his way into the first round at this point, especially with, you know, some of the red flags he's had off the field with his weight and not doing anything at his pro day when teams were very obviously there to see him compared to Paris Johnson doing everything at the pro day as a higher pick. So I think your options really are going to be Jones and Wright there at 17. And I would lean Darnell Wright, even though he's really right tackle only, at least right now in his projection. I know he's done some of left tackle at Tennessee, but I kind of lean Wright as the guy there. I think he fits the mold of what Pittsburgh's looking for in that mean physical run blocker. You know, he's pretty athletic overall on the edge there at right tackle. So that would be my top choice there for now, Alex. And I know we've got 6 days left until the first round. That's kind of where I'm leaning, and we'll get into that later as well. But those are the two options that I feel the most comfortable with the caveat that I definitely do not think Skoronski and Paris Johnson Jr. will be on the board.
Let me throw out a tackle related question to Tom and Joe Clark. Is there one particular tackle in at the top of this class that you would tie your wagon to, that you would even consider moving up, say 4, 5, 6, or let's use 9, because obviously that spot's been talked about or talked about potentially if the Steelers were to move up, they would maybe move up as high as 9. And once again, you know, it's only talk or rumor at this point. But is there any one tackle that you would move up, you know, spots or several spots to get?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think it's definitely a possibility that moving up is on the menu for them. Paris Johnson probably will go before that 9 spot. I think Broderick Jones is somewhere in that 9 to 18 spot where, you know, they could take the 17th pick and 49 and move up and go and get the guy that they want. And then, you know, they had that 32 pick to start the second round, which is a prime spot to trade down. So they could recuperate a pick or two if they indeed trade up. So in my opinion, Broderick Jones is a high possibility for them. I'm not on board with Dawan Jones at all. And as far as Darnell Wright goes, I think he fits what they want to do. But if you're going to move up to take a tackle, or even take a tackle in the, you know, where they stand, I think it should be a left tackle.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah, so, I mean, the one guy, obviously, that I'm in love with in this draft class is Skoronski, but I think he really long-term projects as a guard. And with the work they did bringing in Samalo and Herbig and They're really shoring up that interior. I'm not sure he's a guy now that they would move up for. So if they're going to move up, I think in that range, somewhere between 9 and 12, I think is where they look to jump in and move to. So I think it really would be for Paris Johnson if he's there. I mean, if he's there, obviously, then I think they could look to make the move. But I think he's kind of the guy they look for to kind of long-term anchor that left tackle position. Kind of even this year, if it doesn't start, which I think you probably would, if they're taking him that early and developing him. He'd sit behind Dan Moore Jr. for a year and then take over 2024, 2025. Long term, I think he would probably be. It wouldn't be a bad move to move up to take him. So if that was what they were going to do, I think he would probably be the guy they do it for.
Josh and Jonathan, just kind of similar question. Dave and I have kind of gone back and forth. I think we disagree a little bit, and obviously anything could happen on draft day. Nobody knows. I don't think even the Steelers quite know right now. But if you had to guess, and Jonathan, I'll start with you, is it more likely if I had a crystal ball that was kind of fuzzy and said, I know the Steelers traded that 17 pick. I don't know if they went up or down. Is it more likely in this draft they go up or down? If you had to guess, what direction do you think Omar Khan would go?
For me personally, I'd probably say down. I posted an article about a month ago saying that the Steelers would likely trade down in this draft, at least probably with one of their first two picks at 17 or 32 overall. I've noticed doing the mock draft Mondays and just watching trends, and obviously mock drafts aren't the be all end all when it comes to projections, but it kind of gives you an idea of just where people's kind of stock is falling and how people are kind of viewing general prospects. It just feels like 17 is such a no man's land in terms of okay, maybe you have a Broderick Jones there. Maybe they have Joey Porter Jr. fall into their lap at 17, and it'd be hard for them to pass up on a guy where it's a position of need as well as it's the legacy pick and everything like that. But if those guys really aren't there, they could trade up a little bit, but they already don't have any picks in the 5th and the 6th round. And that they're going to want to be able to bridge that gap of nearly 120, more than 120 picks now that they completed the Allen Robinson trade and traded down from that position. So they're going to want to bridge that gap somehow. I could definitely see a trade where, maybe Kevin Dotson gets dealt maybe, but at the same time, I do think that they're going to trade down in this draft at some point to be able to recoup some of that middle round value. So I think that if you look at the top names being unavailable and having the price to pay up, whether it be a 3rd, 4th round pick, just making that gap even greater, I think if those names that I mentioned are off the board, I think trading down to 23 with the Vikings, I think trading down to possibly 32 with the Chiefs or 31 with the Chiefs is plausible. Just if they want to go get a wide receiver that they really want, or say the Vikings are enamored with Hendon Hooker as a quarterback or something like that. And they'll be able to net either, another day 2 pick in the 3rd round, as well as multiple day 3 picks in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round to do that, while being able to still get a similar player of value in terms of maybe a Brian Brzee, maybe a DeJuan Jones, maybe a Devontae Banks, and getting that same guy where they might have a tier of 3 to 4 guys they're comfortable taking at 17, trade down 4 to 5 picks, recoup more of that middle round draft capital. That makes more sense in my mind than already parting with more draft capital, creating a bigger gap and getting a guy that, can make an impact for you. But at the end of the day, you have less draft capital.
Yeah, and you had the article that was really well received about, could a team, a Minnesota, whoever, want Hendon Hooker and maybe move up for him? Tampa Bay at 19 goes up to 17 to try to block some other squad that's trying to push up. So that totally makes sense. Josh, same question to you. If you had to guess up or down in round 1, what direction do you think Pittsburgh would go?
If you'd asked me this before free agency, I would have said down, just because of the amount of holes and obviously not having that 5th or 6th round pick. But with how aggressive this new front office has been, at least in the last 11 months, I'm saying up. They've done a really nice job of plugging some holes, giving themselves some flexibility when it comes to the draft. And if they identify that guy, say it's Paris Johnson, say Jalen Carter's on the board at 9 or at 10, somewhere in that range, it would not shock me if Omar Khan, moves up and gets his guy. If you have a guy that you like, go and get him. I think that's something that we've always talked about. And based off the work that they've done here in free agency this offseason, kind of reshaping this roster, I can really see this front office just kind of not punting on this draft in a sense and trading, mid-round picks and really just blowing it out of the water, but really just going up and getting their guy and, kind of plugging a major hole, whether it's at left tackle or along the defensive line, if it's a Carter or a Paris Johnson Jr. So I would definitely say moving up.
Let's talk about a guy that's kind of popped into discussion at possibly 17. And then I guess most recently kind of popped out. I don't know if we'll talk a little bit more about him right before the draft here or not, but Brian Branch out of Alabama, obviously more of a slot guy, call him what you will, cornerback, safety, defensive back, whatever. But the Steelers obviously have a seemingly big hole there because it looks like, it would be a collection of guys of Millette and, possibly, I guess Casey or, to fill that role as it sits right now. Tom and Joe, why would that or why wouldn't that happen at 17?
I think there's a chance of it happening because of what Jonathan mentioned of that no man's land at 17. If the top tackles are gone and say the top three corners are gone, there's a group of players, a big blob, that if you told me they were going to go 15th or 55th, I wouldn't be surprised. It's all going to be about, it's all going to be about team need. And, slot corner it's a glaring need on the defense, someone who can cover. Millette's good against the run, but he struggles in the passing game, so they need someone who can cover. And Branch seems to be that hybrid guy who can cover out of the slot. He's probably not going to be able to be the strong safety due to size, but it would fill a need. And, he's one of those highly intelligent players that the team likes to go after. And if they get into a spot at 17 where, those tackles and corners are gone, Branch could be the pick.
Joe?
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking too. If you get to a point of the board where, your best tackle option available is Darnell Wright, you have 3 or 4 quarterbacks, Banks could be off the board. At that point, it's like, okay, you have a deeper cornerback class. You can grab a guy at 32 if you really want like an outside sort of corner. I think Anton Harris would be there at 32 if they want to take a tackle. So then you can grab a guy. I like Tom said, Branch's intelligence is just it would. I'm sure it blew the Steelers away when they met with him at the combine. Like he's just one of those like super smart football players. Obviously, he played the same like star type position that Minka played at Alabama, and those guys just kind of like can float around, make plays all over the field. I think he's kind of the sort of guy that could fit well in Tom in the Steelers defense. So I definitely think there's a chance if you get to the point where you really like your top 4 corners, your top 3 tackles are off the board. I don't think he's a guy that they're going to take over a Deontay Banks or obviously Joey Porter Jr. or Broderick Jones. But if those guys get off the board just because you're in a weird spot at 17, that could be a fit there, and they can look to plug some other holes with their plethora of picks in the 2nd and 3rd.
Jonathan and Joe, both of you were at the combine, and I think did both of you get a chance to talk to Banks, and if so, or Branch and Brian Branch, and if so, can you envision him from that conversation being the guy holding up that jersey at the initial press conference as the first overall pick by the Steelers?
Yeah, I talked to Branch, and I definitely could. He's super well spoken. He's a really intelligent guy. Like you ask him a football question, he'll like really dive into like what he was thinking, what he sees. He went, he's open about his strengths and weaknesses. And he had a huge amount of people at his podium, like getting questions from all over. He handled himself well. Obviously he said he would love to play with Minka. He said one of the guys he modeled himself after is Polamalu. So that's all in that combine interview. So, I could definitely, he's a guy that, I think he'd be a good player on the field. He could definitely win the press conference if he's the guy holding up that jersey. Effie's the pick at 17 next week.
Jonathan, did you talk to him any?
I did not. While Joe was talking to Branch, I was making my rounds around to like all some of the other safeties, just because we figured we'd divide and conquer a little bit. I will say, like, when, staying around with a lot of other people, you heard about how well he interviewed. And that's the thing where it's going to come down to, the hearts and smarts, the character, and he checks all the boxes in terms of like having the brass at his pro day, having the interview with him at the combine, like being that underclassman type of player. Like he can play strong safety, he can play in the nickel. Like he checks all those boxes. Like he's worked with Grady Brown, talked with Grady Brown a lot while at that pro day. So like you see all the boxes being checked. But again, how much is that athleticism going to matter, especially not only to the football coaching staff, but also the front office? Because frankly, he did not have a very good combine in terms of his testing. He's a great football player, and that is obvious when you watch his tape. But is that going to possibly knock him against a guy who is a premier athlete like a Deonte Banks, like Joe said, where, you have this freak of nature outside boundary corner, which is one of their perceived needs. Branch may be like the more like polished overall football player this time, but does that trump, say, like a Branch or a Porter or whatever at 17?
Yeah, it's a fair point, but I just think this team, they need a slot corner. I mean, the versatility that Branch is going to bring can replace a lot of what Cam Sutton did. There's definitely some of those Minka-type traits in Branch's game, not to that level, the ball skills, the range, not quite there, but to me, I think he's a strong fit overall for what Pittsburgh is looking for and what they've kind of lost this offseason. I want to go to Tom now to talk about defensive line. We don't know exactly where Pittsburgh will attack it. We assume they're going to bring somebody in at some point. Do you think it would be more of a nose tackle 0-1 tech, Tom, or more of a 3-tech pass rusher type? And if, regardless of either guy, who are some names that you think Pittsburgh might be especially interested in when it comes to defensive line?
Yeah, so that's an interesting position for this team, because I could see them taking someone like Brzee in the first round or waiting all the way to the 7th, like they did for 7-8 years, like out of 10 years, where they took that 6th, 7th round guy to fill the need. Personally, from what they've done through free agency, I think that more of that 5 technique, the longer arm length guys that can back up Hayward. They've tried to fill that role with Loudermilk and Leal, and neither of them seems to be working out. So I think somewhere along that line is somewhere where they'd like to go. First round, if they go first round, it's going to be Brzee. That's you guys have talked about him on the podcast a lot, and hearts and smarts, and how he's going to be someone that the team's going to like right away. He definitely fills a spot there. If they wait toward the middle rounds, there might be a guy like Cameron Young from Mississippi State. He was 6'3", 304 with 34.5-inch arms. He's got experience. He played mostly as a 0-3 tech, but he has the size to play the 5 tech. He can. He's got good hands. He can stand up the offensive line with his strength. He's able to stack and shed at the point of attack, and he's got potential as a power rusher. He showed some flashes that were really nice. And another guy who is more of probably a late day 3 player. I had him in my first mock, and I think Josh had him in his last mock, is Corey Durden from North Carolina State. He's 6'4". He was 292 when he weighed in at the pro day. He was listed at the 305, 310 range at NC State. So I'm not sure how much they either jacked up his weight or maybe he lost weight for his pro day. But another, long guy with 34 1/8 inch arms, 9 7/8 inch hands. He started out at Florida State and then moved to North Carolina State. He's got experience playing from the 0 tech out to the 5 tech. So he'd be able to be a rotational guy all along the defensive line. Heavy hands, good placement. He's able to reset the line of scrimmage when he fires out. He's got a good motor, and he's got several pass rush moves that he's able to use to get pressure. He doesn't always get home, but he gets pressure up the middle. He's got the ability to play the two gap. He plays with his eyes up consistently on the ball, and he'll pursue all over the field. He kind of fits that late round player that I could see them looking at. So those are a couple guys who, from first to seventh round, that could be options.
Jonathan, I wanted to ask you about one name you mentioned earlier. It's a name I've kind of really started to warm up to in terms of possibly being the pick, and that's Carl Brooks from Bowling Green. Carl Dunbar at the Pro Day, brought in for a visit. Really athletic, pass rusher. Just give me your thoughts on Carl Brooks.
I mean, he makes a lot of sense, basically checking all those boxes that we look at, like, especially when you look at position coach at the Pro Day. Like, in the past, that's predicted so many mid-round Steelers picks. When we look at like George Pickens, or we look at, other guys in the past, just having that play or that position coach at their Pro Day for those middle round picks, or if that be third, fourth round for a guy like Carl Brooks. But you look at it, the body type that you want for that 3-tech 4-eye position for the Steelers is very rare in terms of being able to have that size to be able to play interior, but also have that athleticism and that twitch to be able to function as a pass rusher. And that's nice because, like, while Carl Brooks played a lot on the outside as a stand-up edge rusher at like nearly 300 pounds, he also would kick inside and like use that athleticism to take advantage of guards on the interior. He needs to be, you did his film room, so you understand, like, he needs to be able to get stronger and be able to be more consistent in his run defense, especially playing full on the inside. But if you decide, say the Steelers go corner, they go offensive tackle, say they take a premier edge or safety, and they wait to address defensive line until that third, fourth round, Carl Brooks would be a perfect, ideal person to target, be able to hit that need with a guy that has that athleticism, has that proven pass rush production, and as well as just has the Blues Clues of like Carl or Dunbar there, having the visit, having all those conversations at the combine. He is a Senior Bowl guy, was able to talk to Tomlin and whatnot at the Senior Bowl. So their fingerprints are all over him. So it's just a matter of, okay, do they address D-line early with a guy like Brian Brzee or, Keanu Benton, who's a very similar type body frame, and they take a guy like that, say early second or with one of their day two picks? Or do they wait, address other positions, and take this guy in Carl Brooks, who also makes a ton of sense and honestly could be that developmental guy that you have again behind a Cameron Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi?
Coming out of the season and into draft season, I think most of us would agree that, man, there's no way this team's going to be interested in a center in the draft. But the further we've gotten into this thing and judging by, pro days and visits and interest throughout the process, and even Tony Pauline, I think the Draft Network wrote this morning or yesterday something to the effect of he really thinks the Steelers will draft a center in this draft. Let's send this one out to Josh and Joe, I guess. Could you see this team indeed drafting a center within the first 4 rounds? And if so, who potentially would that center be?
I can absolutely see them drafting a center. As solid as Mason Cole was last year, I don't think he's your long-term building block at center at this point, and I don't think there's a move to center for James Daniels coming at any point. This is a decent class overall. There's some names I certainly like. I do see it happening in the first 4 rounds. They've shown interest in Wisconsin's Joe Tippmann. Obviously, there's been a lot of interest in John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. Jonathan was on him last summer. We had some conversations about this center class. Joe and I saw Ricky Stromberg out of Arkansas in person in Vegas. He was pretty impressive. Our first impression when we saw him walk into the interview room was that man is a tank. Just broad shoulders, long arms. Good tape, too. Obviously, the Steelers took Luke Whippler from Ohio State out to dinner at the Pro Day with Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones. And then there's my personal favorite, Olusegun Oluwatimi out of Michigan.
God bless you.
Yes, that was very hard to say. You would think, as much as I like him, I would feel comfortable saying that, but it's incredibly hard. But there's some guys here in the first 4 rounds that could really sit a year behind Cole, upgrade the depth significantly from a JC Hassenauer the previous year, and then they could step in 2024 and be that guy. If I were to pick a guy that they are going to select, if I had to predict now, I think it would be John Michael Schmitz.
Joe, did you have any thoughts on the center class there, Joe? I know David did mention.
I mean,
that.
Josh basically covered everything. The only other name I'd throw out, and he's more of a guard, but he's center capable, is Steve Avila, just because they host him for a top 30 visit. So if they have their mindset on taking a guy that can play center and the second or the third, I think Avila could be a name that they look at.
I was going to ask you too, Joe, and this is kind of a bigger picture question, but sometimes I get nervous when things start to feel in place with the Steelers mock draft. Okay, they're going to go probably corner, tackle early, and then defensive line. Like, there's always that curveball. There's always that thing you don't expect in the draft, especially in a first year where you have a new GM and Omar Khan, a new assistant GM and Andy Weidel. I know it's so hard to predict because, anything that's a surprise is a surprise and hard to predict by definition. But if you had to kind of guess a curveball in this draft at any point and say the top 3 rounds, where do you think it would be?
I think it might just be I think it would go in the first, because if you look, they have the picks in the second, and they have the 2 picks in the second, they have a pick in the third. I mean, that's 3 picks they can use to, address like some serious depth. So if at 17, the board doesn't shake how they want, you get some of the top corners off the board, some of the top tackles off the board. You're not really comfortable taking a Brian Brzee maybe at 17. So then where do you go? You can look, they've been open this offseason about their intention of building up the run game. Tomlin said it in Phoenix, the owners' meetings. I mean, you can look at just signing Small, signing Herbig, adding to that. So if you don't want to take a tackle, then you can grab the best blocking tight end in the draft and take Darnell Washington, who they just had on a visit. He expands your pass game as a second receiving option next to Freiermuth. And then you just add a mauler of a blocking tight end who helps you in the run game, helps Pickett's development in the pass game is just another threat as a tight end. Might be the most talented player on the board at 17 at a position they could kind of maybe use some depth help if they don't want to go, defensive line there, and they can go and address their needs in the second and be comfortable knowing that they really improve their run game with a pick that maybe wasn't a traditional position that they're expected to take in the first round.
Sure. It's a great name to mention. And Jonathan, I want to ask you your thoughts on Darnell Washington coming in for a visit. Just your thoughts overall. Is he worth the pick? At 1732. I mean, how do you see that fitting into Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I immediately when Joe started talking about like the off the wall pick, and I'm like, he's going to talk tight end. He's going to talk. So it's nice to have that kind of telepathy between it. But I was definitely thinking the same thing. I think 17 would be rich for Washington because while, again, just an absolute planet theory, just ridiculous like size for the position and just what he brings to like the run game, what he brings in the passing game, he's still very like in terms of like his production and what he's done at the college level, he's a little bit more of a projection in the sense of like, especially as a receiver. And are you going to have Darnell Washington become, your tight end 1 over Pat Freiermuth? If so, then maybe you justify the pick at 17. But if he's tight end 2, I think it's harder to justify the pick at 17 rather than being able to pick like a corner or a tackle and then see if he's there and he's the best value, say at 32. I highly doubt he would fall to 49. Could have stranger things happen, yes. But I think you're looking more with one of your day 2 picks. And I think that's the mindset that the Steelers have kind of going into this, being like, hey, we have this physical specimen, this like planet theory guy that, just there's not many of them walking around on the earth. And he would be able to aid in what we want to do. But could we just see where the value of the board falls and say, depending on what they do at 17, they look at 32 and say, okay, the top tackles and the top corners are off the board. We grabbed our guy at 17. Darnell Washington is there. We could opt to take a player of a lower caliber or a lower tier at this pick, or we could take Darnell Washington. I think, you have teams like maybe the Bengals, they signed Irv Smith. They've been rumored to be very interested in a guy like Darnell Washington. Wouldn't like to see him against the Steelers twice a year. But I think overall 32 is probably the sweet spot. If they want to take him, that it would be at 32. And I would hedge more likely at 49 than 17. But I think you look for that sweet spot at 32 at the top pick in the second round.
Are we underselling or maybe overlooking Michael Mayer as well out of Notre Dame? I mean, obviously, he didn't come in for a pre-draft visit. Tomlin and Kahn weren't at the pro day. I know I think it was Dan Colbert was there. Dan Colbert and Anthony Rooney were at the Notre Dame pro day, but I keep seeing him compared to Heath Miller, and I'm sure that's going to raise some eyebrows for Steeler fans, but he's kind of that more polished player than Washington at that position. A really good inline blocker, legitimately catches everything. Could he kind of be that wild card as well at 17, even though that might be a little too rich?
I think that's tough to see just because, like, obviously you played the Blues Coos game, and I don't think that, like, the top guys were there at, like, Notre Dame. So 17 might be tough. Should he be there at 32? Maybe. And again, like, we're not dictated to playing the pro day with Kahn and, like, Tomlin, depending on how things have gone in the past. But it is something that you have to consider. But you also just look at, like, the guys that they have shown interest in, like, the fact of bringing in Washington for a visit, and then also showing interest in, having the tight ends coach Alfredo Roberts say at, like, Penn State to talk to Brenton Strange, or I think they were at Michigan to talk to Schoonmaker. I think it's kind of one of those things where you have this complete opposite in Washington to complement what you have in your tight end one in Pat Freiermuth. Yes, I think Michael Mayer is a more well-rounded prospect, but at the same time, if the Steelers want to become this bully ball team, and while Freiermuth has potential to maybe develop a little bit more of a blocker, his blocking is overall capped compared to someone like Washington, where you could go ahead and draft a freaking DeJuan Jones, and then you could draft a Darnell Washington, and you could put those two guys at the end of the line of scrimmage and be like, okay, we're going to go ahead and run people over. And I think that that's the mindset that they kind of want to have, especially if they want to embrace this bully football on offense. So I think being able to have a complement like Washington and Freiermuth does yourself a lot of good. And if you don't have the ability to draft a guy like Washington, you can still upgrade or add talent at the position that can challenge or potentially unseat Zach Gentry with a guy like Schoonmaker, a guy like Strange later in the later rounds, just because of how deep this tight end class is.
Let's continue on this tight end, and let's just kind of be a multi-tiered question that maybe all four of you can chime in on. Why hasn't there? I think Josh is on to something there in the fact that why is there no conversation about Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame as a slam dunk? Where is he going? I guess where I'm getting at this is there a possibility that a guy like Michael Mayer even falls down to 32 in this thing? Because we've seen tight ends. This is a deep tight end class overall, and you can make arguments that another tight end or two might be taken off the board ahead of him, I think, in round one. So, why is there no real talk? I mean, there's been talk, obviously, but why isn't a lot of first-round talk been centered around Michael Mayer? And then adding on to that discussion there is, obviously with the addition, I don't think a lot of people would been given credence to the fact of the Steelers maybe taking a tight end in the first 4 rounds ahead of them acquiring Allen Robinson via a trade, which kind of shores up that wide receiver room a little bit more. Why should this team consider drafting a tight end within the first 4 rounds? I know it's a multi-layered kind of question there, and chip away with it whatever way you want, but start chiming in on all that.
I'll jump in on Mayer first. I think there's that top 4, top 5 at the position that it really depends on the style you want at the position. I think Mayer, he had the slowest 40 of any tight end out of that top 4 at the combine. I know he had the shortest arms and the smallest hands. So that could push him out of the first round compared to guys like Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, and obviously Washington, who JH said is just an absolute freak. But Mayer, I think, is the most complete package at the position in this class. It sure would be fun if he fell out of the first round and was sitting there at 32, because I think there's a pretty clear fit there. But as far as this team needing to draft a tight end in the first 4 rounds, or if they should, I definitely think they should if they want to, lean into this 12 personnel more heavily like they did in the second half last season. Gentry's just on that 1-year deal. I think it's the same deal that Terrell Edmonds signed last offseason. Dave, I think you laid that out in a post recently. I don't think him being back on that 1-year deal blocks them from taking a tight end. I thought Gentry at times last year was a decent blocker. He certainly took some steps forward, but if you really want this offense to lean into that 12 personnel and pound the rock on the ground, you've got to try and upgrade at the position from a blocking standpoint. And there are some guys in this class that can certainly be that upgrade. Schoonamaker from Michigan was a good blocker. They've obviously had interest in him. There's Brenton Strange. He's got some really good tape. I'm curious to see where he goes. I've seen him, 4th round the whole way to undrafted in certain areas. I think they saw Davis Allen from Clemson up close at the pro day. So there's certainly options here that they could go after to help solidify that position. I know obviously in the last few years, they've addressed it in the draft, whether it was Freiermuth or Gentry or obviously Connor Hayward last year, but they need that dominant run blocker to kind of handle those bigger players on the edge. And I don't think they have that right now. So there's some pieces in this draft that could certainly be the role moving forward. And I think that they have to take a swing on that, whether that's in the 3rd or 4th round, just based off of the identity they want to have offensively.
Tom, you want to jump in on the tight end talk here?
You're muted, Tom.
Yeah, I did the report on Schoonmaker, and I was pleasantly surprised by his ability to block. He's listed at 6'5", 251. He's got room to add some weight, but he positions himself so well, plays with the great pad level. He's got active hands. He's not just trying to latch on and hold on. He's constantly fighting. He climbs to the second level. He blocks in space. They used him at fullback as well. Like Josh said, if they're going to commit to the running game, they need someone who's going to be a blocker, and he'll walk in and be the best blocking tight end on the team right away. As far as the receiving side goes, he wasn't as productive as you might like to see in college. I think some of that had to do with anticipation of the quarterback, waiting to see him get open rather than leading him open. But they used him on all 3 levels. He's got good hands. He kind of fights the low throws, but other than that, he's pretty good. And he's got 4.63 speed, so he can move after the catch. I think he's definitely someone they could add. I have him as a 3rd round pick. I think that's the 3rd, 4th round is right where his range is, and I think he could definitely be someone they attach themselves to.
Anybody else want to jump in on either Mayer or this team potentially drafting a tight end in the first 4 rounds? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just trying to find that body type. If you want to challenge Gentry to be that blocker, you got to find somebody that has that size, that inline blocking that can be a bit tougher to do at the college level. But we'll see. I think the names being mentioned here are certainly worth mentioning. I want to talk about a different position, one that, I probably should have talked about earlier here in this podcast, but edge rusher. What's behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith? Right now, it's not a whole lot of known. And we kind of had the assumption for a while that, Bud Dupree will come back. And of course, he goes to Atlanta. And so Pittsburgh has not shown a lot of obvious interest in the edge class. A couple of guys have come in, a mix of early round candidates and later round guys. And so, Jonathan, I'll start with you. Who are some potential edge targets? Because there don't seem to be a lot of obvious names. And I don't feel like this is a great class overall for what Pittsburgh looks for when it comes to those 3-4 stand-up outside linebackers.
Yeah. So the one thing that I keep kind of going back toward is the theme that we're going to continue to prove the offensive and defensive line, the trenches, right? And oftentimes when you think of the defensive line, you think of nose tackle, you think of 3-tech 4-eye. You have to realize with like Pittsburgh's system, or the system that they run their defense, their outside linebackers are basically glorified stand-up defensive ends. And you think about where Andy Weidel comes from in Philadelphia, where they were able to run 8 deep on that defensive line and just send wave after wave. We look at what they've done so far this offseason, adding guys like Armon Watts, Brandon Fehoko, again, not long-term solutions, but paired with them with Montravius Adams, having all three of those guys playing at the nose tackle spot, I think you're going to be able to mix and match those guys and be able to get those snaps of 30 to 35% for a nose tackle. Being able to have they've upped a guy like Larry Ogunjobi and being able to have him start opposite Cam Hayward, being able to still have guys like, DeMarvin Leal. Does he factor in on the edge? Is he kind of this versatile guy that plays inside, outside? Guys like Isaiah Loudermilk, so on and so forth. But you look at that edge position, and granted, they brought back Kinsey Woshay. They don't have any proven depth or upside outside of their stars in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And losing Watt, obviously, you'll never be able to make up for his loss and his impact on the field. But they were severely hurt in the fact that they had to go to a guy like Malik Reed when Watt was out. And you look at this edge class, and that's where, again, I can say what you said, Alex, how this edge class maybe not has a lot of natural fits at that 3-4 outside linebacker, but I will say that it is a very, very deep edge class with anywhere from 13 to 15 names that deserve third round grades and up. And you look at the guys that are there that they've shown interest in. Obviously you have Nolan Smith, who is kind of that tweener, but at the same time, he is a possible guy to consider. I think 17 is way too rich. I did his draft profile. He's a very raw player who's also coming off of a pec tear. I'd be more comfortable with him on day 2, but I don't think he lasts that long. I think three guys you really have to put in the crosshairs for a potential early edge is Will McDonald from Iowa State, Felix Eneduke Uzoma from Kansas State, and then I would say Derek Hall from Auburn. Just because you have all three of those guys kind of in that anywhere from probably late 30s to 50, 60 range in just terms of overall ranking. I think that one of those three guys could easily be in play at 49. Say the Steelers decide to go tackle and corner, and then maybe take the best edge rusher rather than reaching on a defensive line or a tight end at 49. Take that premier edge rusher that some teams may have an early second round grade just because there's so much depth. Add that quality pass rusher that can, not only come in and be able to give TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith breathers, not only be that injury insurance, but also maybe finding packages where you can deploy all three on third and long situations. I think it makes a lot of sense being able to build up this pass rush, not only to protect yourself in the case of injury, but also adding premium talent and adding great players, knowing that all three of those options are great pass rushers.
Yeah, I'm with you on Derek Hall. I just wish this team had some more visible interest in him, and they were at McDonald's Pro Day. They did bring in Eneduke Uzama for a visit, so that makes sense. If I could ask Omar Khan one question, I would ask him, what is the Marvin Leal's weight? I just want to know. And I know that he had said, that they view him as a versatile guy. And so maybe they're feeling more comfortable there if they feel like he can be some edge depth, and they may go sign a veteran the way that they did Melvin Ingram 2 years ago, hopefully with, a better ending. But Dave, I want to just go back to you really quickly. Just your thoughts with this edge class, because it feels like there's a hole there, but there's some question marks, and you're just trying to see how all the pieces are going to fit.
Yeah, and I'm with you. You right out of the chute were on Derek Hall, and I thought for sure we'd see a little bit more presence or than what was there at that pro day. I like Eneduke Uzama out of Kansas State, but the concern there, you get more of, I think, a Jason Worlds feel with him from the fact that he did not play on his feet very much at all at Kansas State. Tyler Wise, he's huge on Uzama. So and obviously they brought him in, so there's a fit there. Tula Peloto out of USC. Obviously there's been some interest there. Which did any of you guys watch any of Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri? And because he kind of fits what they look for. Plus, I think he's not even 22 years of age yet. Did either of you guys watch Isaiah McGuire? And another guy, and I have talked about this several times after learning the difference in the two Byron Youngs. But the Byron Young out of Tennessee looks like he's a little undersized height-wise, just like Derek Hall is out of Auburn there. But some fourth-round potential there. So fill in the blanks for me on a guy specifically like McGuire, if any of you have watched him.
Just real quick, I did the report on McGuire. It was a while ago. I feel like I have to go back and reread that report. But he's a big guy. He's got leverage, power. I thought he had better bending through contact than I expected for a guy of that frame. I put more third, fourth round kind of grade on him. I know Byron Young from Tennessee, I have not watched. You guys can jump in. I know that he's a bit older prospect, kind of a bit rawer still. So I don't know, what to make of that when a guy that's older and still kind of has some things to work on.
Anybody else want to chime in on a couple of those middle edge guys?
Yeah, I did the profile on Byron Young from Tennessee. And again, very explosive, very twitchy, and he just has a motor that just doesn't stop. But again, his hand usage is very raw when it comes to being a pass rusher. He likes to run the arc, and he wins a lot on slants and stunts and twists and things of that nature, and just winning with second and third effort rather than winning with quote unquote clean sacks, like we like to talk about when we're watching pass rushers trying to get defeat blocks and get to the quarterback. So his athleticism may get him pushed up boards, but the fact that he's already 25 years old, he still needs to develop that hand usage. He's decently stout. He's pretty stout against the run, but there's points in times where he is a little undersized. So he will get overwhelmed by size and by power. I see him more as that fourth round option. Just that way, instead of looking at from rose-colored glasses with his athleticism, just looking where he is at now as more of that backup rotational guy that is in a similar light to Quincy Roche and can kind of battle to be that edge 3, edge 4. And then when it kind of goes to Felix Aduke-Uzomah, Dave, when we're talking about him in terms of planning with his hand, the dirt, a majority of the time, yes, Jason Wills did that, but we also look at a guy like Lamar Woodley, who was just a base defensive end at Michigan. When he started his career, was a Steelers second-round pick back when he got drafted. They stood him up. And I would probably say Felix Aduke-Uzomah is more of that leaner frame that kind of more matches what that prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker is than what Woodley was, kind of being a bigger, stout body coming out. So I think when I talked to Felix at the combine, he talked to me saying, are you standing up? That was my first question to him. Are you standing up? Are you working on these things? He's like, yeah, I'm working on these things. I'm working on standing up. I'm working on playing with my hand in the dirt. I'm working on all my drops. I'm going through all these different things. So he knows that this is a question that teams are asking him, more specifically probably the Steelers as well too, just based off their scheme and their system. So he knows that's the question that's going to be asked of him. So I just think because he didn't do it at Kansas State based on the type of defense that they played, doesn't mean he can't do it at the NFL level.
And teams are not going to look at Uzomah as probably a base, as a 4-3 base end, right? I mean, he's a little at 255. Normally you see those guys at 270 or something like that. And he is 6'3", so he's not in that prime 6'4", 6'5" area there as well too. And plus he's got, age on his size, on his side as well too, not even being still just over the age of 21, whereas a guy like Will McDonald I think is coming up on 24 years of age. So it does. And look, I love his tape, once again about Uzomah and talked about him, months ago coming out of that bowl all-star game and all like that. I just, the biggest thing that I've had to overcome is him not playing on his feet as much there. So I do think that if they were to take one in a third or fourth round, that Uzomah could potentially be the guy. I think McDonald's potential being a guy, even though Derek Hall, they haven't shown much interest in him. I think he could fit the mold there. And, this team does have to, it feels like this team has to spend, well, not has to, but should really, really think about spending, a third or fourth round pick on an edge.
The one name that I keep kind of circling here late in the process is a name that I kind of highlighted heading into the Shrine Bowl, and that's Mississippi State's Tyrus Wheat. He's certainly undersized at 6'0", but he's 263 pounds. Really, really productive in the SEC. I think he had 27 tackles for a loss, just under 20 sacks. And I think he had 35 career starts with Mississippi State. He originally went there as a safety, moved down to linebacker, and then his last 2 years at Mississippi State, he put on weight and played on the edge. Joe and I saw him in Vegas. I know that Joe and I kind of talked about him entering the week of practice. He didn't really stand out in practice, but I think he's more of a game guy than, those glorified one-on-one drills and all that. His demeanor, I talked to him, sat down, had a 15-minute interview with him. His demeanor is very James Harrison-like, all business, kind of standoffish, not in a bad way. But I felt like I was doing a lot of the talking, asking questions, and he short answers, all ball, not really letting people get insight into him. But his tape is quite intriguing. He can move all over. His motor runs hot constantly. He's just a physical player. He's that short, squatty type of guy, and a lot of similar measurables to Alex Highsmith, who obviously the Steelers drafted in the 3rd round in 2020. So that's kind of a guy I have circled for maybe that 4th round pick. But even with him as your 3rd outside linebacker entering 2023, I still don't have a great feel for the depth there behind those two. But Wheat is certainly an intriguing guy for me as far as a developmental piece goes.
Tom, real quick, Lucas Van Ness and Keon White. Alex and I just recently circled back in some podcasts to talk about those two. Can you see either one of those guys fitting in what the Steelers do?
My impression is no. Physically, the way they're built, they look much more of the 4-3-N type player. It just doesn't seem scheme wise what the Steelers like to do. Now they've tried to shoehorn guys in the past couple of years with guys like Leal, but they seem much more comfortable, with in their hand in the dirt and kicking inside on passing downs on an even front. So I would not put either of them high on the list.
I do think, could Keon White, though, be that base end? The body type seems a little slimmer, but, what is he, 6'5", 6'6", 285, like 34-inch arms? In terms of the frame, the guys they look for, that's generally like as close as you're going to get in this modern age of college football defense.
Yeah, and I think you said on the podcast that you think you can add some pounds there, like he has a frame that can hold it. So it's possible they could look at him inside, but in my opinion, I think he's better off in an even front.
Okay, fair enough. Running out of time here, I want to get to at least one other position here, quarterback, and it's not my favorite topic.
Make sure to hit wide receiver real quick too.
Okay, yeah, for sure. But to go to quarterback, because this team could add a quarterback. They've had some interest in some of these day 3 type guys, in Clayton Tune from Houston and Jaron Hall from BYU. You guys know my thoughts on day 3 quarterbacks. Don't do it. But Josh, I'll start with you. Who are some options there? Is it Tune? Is it Hall? I hear those guys feel like more maybe 4th, 5th rounders, but quarterbacks can fall sometimes. So who are some of those potential 7th round quarterback options for Pittsburgh?
I'll throw out 3 names here. Obviously, Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. They showed interest in him at the Shrine Bowl. He was the first player that mentioned he met with the Steelers out there, had a pretty solid week. Max Duggan from TCU kind of fits that, that experienced starter, toughness, kind of backup role you're looking for. The one name, though, that I've kind of come on to, well, I should say 2 names that I've come on to here in recent weeks. I really kind of like the tape that Sean Clifford from Penn State had, especially this year. I know he had a rocky career at Penn State, was very up and down, but he's on the older side, has a ton of starts under his belt. He's athletic, tough as all nails. I think he could be kind of that 6th, 7th round guy. I did give him a higher grade than that, but I just think he might fall. And then one guy that Alex, you talked to, and I also talked to as well, and I'm actually finishing up the report on him, is Gannon's Corey Curtis. That guy is intriguing. I think he definitely has a draftable grade. And I think it could be the same situation the Steelers were in last year with Chris Oladokun, where you don't want to get into that bidding war in undrafted free agency with these guys. So maybe you spend that 251st overall pick that they got in the pick swap with the Rams on that developmental 3rd quarterback. It might not be the best use of an asset there. But I'd rather do that and ensure I have a guy I like as my quarterback 3 rather than hoping he takes a contract offer that that the Steelers could potentially give him in free agency.
Yeah, and Curtis was to Ohio State to Bryant to Gannon, so a pretty crazy journey there, but was really productive the last 2 years for Gannon. Like Dave mentioned, Joe, I'll ask you this receiver class. I know that we've kind of, fans and myself included as well, have kind of brushed aside the idea of receiver now that Allen Robinson, that trade officially announced by the Steelers today. But, Robinson likely to be in Pittsburgh for only one season. So is it short-sighted to say that receivers off the table and, putting that on the table? Who are some guys, let's say maybe some day 3 names at wide receiver that would fit Pittsburgh?
Yeah, the one day 3 name, not D3, that I really couldn't shake and still having trouble shaking is Charlie Jones out of Purdue. I mean, the guy was just so productive last year. He's got the ability to return kicks and punts, which the Steelers don't really have a guy right now who could do that with Steven Sims out. So I think, and I know you threw Malik Knowles too from Kansas State. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they take a guy. Maybe now it's not. I think Jones is probably more of a 4th round prospect. But now, if they take a guy in the 7th, I know Thayer Thomas was a guy they met with. He's another guy who can return kicks and punts. To get a guy who can, maybe add some depth at receiver, but also be the team's primary return man. Because with Steven Sims out of the picture, I mean, they still have Olszewski, but after last season, I don't really see them going back to him and giving him any sort of big role on special teams. And obviously James Pierre is not going to be the guy to get it done. So bringing in a rookie in the 7th round who can, kind of compete for that job right off the bat, as some is like in a Thomas or a Knowles, I think is probably more likely than taking the Jones or somebody else in the 4th. But I mean, anything can happen. I mean, I definitely don't think the position's completely off the board. I think they're going to take a guy, just probably not as high priority. Like I know, like Josh Downs is a guy that was a pretty popular mock to them in the 2nd. I mean, Cedric Tillman, another one, and Jonathan Mingo. But I don't think I don't necessarily think they're going to spend on that caliber of player. But I mean, they could and just kind of give them a redshirt year, I guess, with Robinson. Are they going to be in for a year? So I mean, anything's possible, but I just think it's more likely they spend it later in the draft than earlier.
Is there any of you that think there's a high chance, let's say, I don't know, greater than 65% chance, just throwing out a random number, that this team drafts a wide receiver in the first 4 rounds?
I wouldn't put it quite that high, but their history says they like that 2nd and 3rd round receiver. So if they were going to take a Mingo up there, it wouldn't shock me at all.
Okay.
I think looking at it as well, too, one name that I kind of go back to a little bit, obviously Mingo being that 3rd round kind of guy. I think if they hit their basis in terms of addressing the offensive and defensive lines kind of in the corner position, like we're kind of seeing the trend follow. If they get to that 4th round, and Tyler Wise is going to love me saying Jaden Reed's on the board in the 4th round, I think that that's a guy that they would possibly run to the table and basically take at that 4th round pick, just to be able to, he's inside outside versatile. He has special teams background. He can naturally play in the slot. He can play outside. Deontay Johnson is under contract. They just traded for Allen Robinson, but he can just develop as that number 4, number 5 with Calvin Austin. If you can have a wide receiver core of Pickens, of Deontay, of Allen Robinson, of Calvin Austin 3rd, and Jaden Reed. And then depending on what you do with Allen Robinson after 2023, obviously Deontay Johnson's under a contract extension, albeit not a long contract extension. Jaden Reed could be that wide receiver you bring in that develops and is waiting in the wings to be able to be that young guy that you can possibly pair with like Calvin Austin and Pickens for years to come.
Yeah, I know Tyler and I both big fans of Jaden Reed, watching him at the Senior Bowl. My last question here to finish these things out, finish the conversation out for you guys. I was going to ask, give me your one name at 17, but then I might be spoiling some future mock drafts, and I want everybody listening to go read your mock draft. So I'm going to put it this way, and Josh, I'll start with you. Give me the 2 names you're kind of most thinking about at pick 17. So we'll have to click your mock draft to see who your actual answer is, but give me like the 2 names you're kind of competing with to decide which one should be the pick at 17 in terms of what you think will happen.
I'm leaning Darnell Wright and Deontay Banks. I know obviously Deontay Banks, it doesn't line up with the pro day stuff and all that, but that's kind of where I'm leaning right now, debating those two. I don't think Joey Porter Jr. will be there on the board. I don't think those other big three tackles will be there. So that's where I'm leaning right now. That's where my head is at. And like you said, I'll have my final mock out early next week.
Okay, Joe, same to you. Give me two, or maybe even the podium. Give me like 1, 2, 3 of the top 3 names you're kind of considering as finalists to be that guy at 17.
Not to sound like a broken record, but I was with Josh that my 2, so I'll add a third. So because Wright and Banks are my 2, just the way I think the board's going to shake out. I think a third I'll add is Breezy, just because he really fits, the hearts and smarts that they look for. He's got the prior relationship with Tomlin. He was a big time recruit, played in a big time program. Even though his tape isn't super, super impressive, he's a guy that, they think they can work with and get a lot out of him. I mean, he's obviously a phenomenal person. His character's through the roof. Wouldn't hate having him in Pittsburgh. So I think he's definitely a guy that is probably more under consideration at 17 than we've kind of accounted for in recent months. So he would probably be, outside of Banks and Wright, he would probably be the third guy I have on that list.
Okay, fair enough. Good point there. Tom, same question to you.
Yeah, in no particular order, I'll give you Broderick Jones. Whether he falls to that spot or they go up and get him, I think he's definitely a possibility. Brian Brzee is also, again, the hearts and smarts, the player they're going to like. He can fill that position behind Hayward and grow into the spot. And for the third name, I'll go with Brian Branch. He fills a need. He's an intelligent player. They've had success with an Alabama safety before, so I think he's definitely on board.
All right, Jonathan.
Yeah, so I was gonna include both Deontay Banks and then also Darnell Wright, but then the one guy that I keep kind of going back toward a little bit, and again, it's kind of like the question, will he be there? And, just knowing that they have so many different possibilities, they can go cornerback or tackle. But I just think, looking at last year when we analyzed the quarterback position, we knew they were going to take a quarterback. We just didn't know which one. I know a bunch of us were interested in just the enamor factor of Malik Willis, but it just made so much sense to just stay in-house with Kenny Pickett. And then you look at just what they've shown with Najee Harris. You look at just the interest that they've shown with other guys in the past. I think that if he's there and he's available for them to take, I think Joey Porter Jr. would be the pick. To be honest, that's the question if he is there. But I think if he is over a guy like Banks, just because of all the connections, all the interest, the need, the fit for the need, everything like that, I think it makes too much sense. It's just a matter if he's there or not. So I think 17, should he be there? I think that's a pick that they make.
Let's end this with a true or false real quick related to Joey Porter Jr. True or false? Joey Porter Jr. will be drafted with one of the first 6. True or false? Joey Porter will still be on the board at 17 overall.
False.
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 True.
All right.
Okay.
Fair enough. All right, Dave, any final thoughts?
No, I just appreciate all the work that you guys have put in throughout this thing. And, I know several of you have gone to the all-star games and all like that. And Tom, we look to maybe get you to one of these here in the future as well, too. The draft profiles have really helped me learn a lot about these guys throughout the process that you guys have written and all, and just really have enjoyed watching you guys learn about these prospects to help me learn about the prospects as well, too.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I just looked at the numbers last night. I believe we are right at our goal of 256 draft profiles. So you guys did a fantastic job there to get those out there at the end. Cannot thank you guys enough. We'll certainly have you guys on after the draft to get your thoughts on what'll be a very eventful last week of April for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So appreciate your guys' time. We'll take a pause and come back with the rest of the show. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And again, our thanks to Josh, Joe, Jonathan, and Tom for the discussion. Really good discussion with all those guys and just their great work this entire draft season. Really happy and proud that we're going to hit our goal of at least 256 player profiles before the draft. And so hopefully we'll have almost all of our bases covered whenever the picks come in over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we can't thank these guys enough, and obviously the guys in this roundtable and Tyler Wise and Owen and Ross McCorkle and who else is part of that draft?
Yeah, Jacob Harrison's done a good job. Yeah, so the whole team.
Tom, and obviously Tom Mead was in this roundtable and all. And look, if you're listening to this and you have a you think you have an understanding of how to break down tape and think that you can write up profiles. Obviously, we're winding down this offseason when it comes to that. Next offseason, we might be looking to add one or two members to the team, and it obviously is a paid position by profile there. So don't be afraid to reach out to us and send us some of your work. Obviously, we would like to see your work as an example to kind of look at your football knowledge and ability to do this. But just want to kind of throw out early that if you think you have a good background in this and you think you might want to join the Steelers Depot team, reach out to Alex or myself, and we'll have a look at your work.
Yeah, always considering talented people that'll bring value to the site. One other draft-related note here before we begin wrapping things up, Dave, just have a shameless plug, interview I did with Garrett Kokab, the nose tackle from Carroll College. I know it's a small school, but Pittsburgh has shown interest in him. They specifically asked Kokab to be at the Montana Pro Day that took place earlier this month. He's a big Steelers fan. He's got Pittsburgh ties, and his tape actually is pretty impressive. So I talked to him, had that interview up on the site for you guys to check out. Any other thoughts or anything else, Dave, you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, tell people real quick about your walk the mock the other night.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was against the computer, did all 7 rounds, and so I thought it turned out really well. Like, obviously, I don't expect this thing to actually, happen on the real draft day, but to get Paris Johnson at pick 17 is pretty absurd. And then we got Darnell Washington at 32, and then I think Julius Brents, and I thought overall it was a pretty strong draft class.
Yeah, and if you missed that, it's both up on SteelersDepot.com. You can watch it there, or you can go to Alex Kozora's YouTube channel and watch that. You have the patience of Job. You were made you were made to do that, and I think you finally figured out how to do polls.
Look at me.
Yeah, you were really progressing there, old man, and it turned out real. You have a lot more patience doing that walk the mock stuff than I do.
And we'll do it. Thank you. We'll do it one more time. I made mention of, because it was against the computer, not quite as fun to do it against the CPU than it is actual people. I was able to get into a mock for Saturday night, I think around 8:20 p.m. It's 7 rounds. I probably won't do all 7 rounds because I'll be there forever, but I'll probably hop in to do, I don't know, the first 2-3 rounds and just kind of see how it goes for Pittsburgh. So I'll probably do kind of a short mini live stream on that come Saturday night.
All right. Look forward to that.
All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
Boy, action-packed show today, right?
Mm-hmm. What do we got here in the email machine?
Up here on the email machine, we have Brian Tellini writes in, Dave and AK, six days, guys. Where does safety fall in terms of compared to our other needs, in your opinion? Any names you're looking at past Brian Branch? So where does safety fall in terms of compared to our other needs, in your opinion? I think when it comes to true safety and outside of Brian Branch, you're saying who's really probably more of a slot corner. As far as need goes, with them re-signing Casey and adding Keanu Neal, it's not overly high, I wouldn't think. However, who was it? Anthony Johnson I was talking about out of Iowa State. Mm-hmm. Would and I don't know where he's going to go in this thing. He feels like he could go. He's another Herbig for me. It feels like he could go anywhere from 4th to early 7th. I think because remember, Anthony Johnson out of Iowa State was a cornerback, and then he moved to safety his last year at Iowa State. Really did good in that transition there. The Steelers, I think, really like him. He really his post combine interview. He said the Steelers talked specifically how they would use him. If they drafted him, and he becomes a very, very intriguing guy for this team, especially if they were to pick up like a fourth or fifth round pick in this thing somehow, but overall, I think you would agree with me. Safety, a strong safety in general does not seem to be very high on the needs option.
I mean, there's some Band-Aids there with Neal, who's kind of that classic box type. And of course, re-signing DeMonte Casey, who can wear a couple different hats. But, long term, what's your outlook on that? It's pretty shaky. So it's been lessened and there are some options there, but I feel like you still want to have an eye on that. I just think it's a really bad safety class. And so to try to find that name has been difficult to do, especially once you get past Brian Branch, who's a little bit later to play that strong safety role. With Anthony Johnson, when he was playing corner, was it slot? Was it outside? Was he kind of mixing?
I think he moved around a little bit in there. If it's been a while since I went into. I'll tell you this: I had to after doing all that work that I did on him right after that Iowa State pro day, I had to step away from him a little bit because I felt myself having a bias towards him.
Okay.
Because I've talked several times that there's not many kids in this class that I'm really, over the top enamored with and all like that. And I wouldn't call him a draft crush or anything like that. But him, Herbig, Schoonmaker, there's several that I'm highly, highly intrigued about. And he is on that list overall. And I think just a super clean prospect character and all like that. You haven't done the safety what they look for thing yet. Will you get that?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Let me look up the names. I think he might have been on that list. Let me pull it back up here to confirm.
Okay. And I don't know if I can't remember if he did everything. I think he did everything at the combine.
I'm pretty sure he's in our one box away. Let me pull up the list. The safeties who hit everything was Connor from Virginia Tech, Merriweather from Iowa, and Daniel Scott from Cal. One box away, only two names. It was Javarius Owens from Houston and Anthony Johnson from Iowa State. He missed in the bench. He did it, only at 12 reps, but he's close to checking every single box.
And with him being a converted cornerback, probably not too surprising, right?
Yeah, typically more athletic, but even just having the size requirements too, and some of those things, it's good to see that affirmed by the study.
Okay, so once again, I view him as anywhere from, I don't know, 4th to 6th round type of guy because of that position move and all like that. Might drop him down a little bit. I could see the Steelers having interest in him later in the draft. Potentially there. So, but once again, I unless we're talking about a guy like Brian Branch early, who's really more slot than he is anything else, I don't think we're going to be talking about safety, at least in the first 4 rounds when it comes to a Steelers pick.
Yeah, I think there's a potential for need there, but just the class does not really justify it. But I think if you could find that strong safety who could also come down and play over slot is ideal because, again, I think the most underrated need for this team, and we touched on it during the roundtable, is slot corner. Like, so much of the focus has been on the outside guys, and I get that it is something to need and address, but slot corner, there is a big vacancy there, and you can't just have Cam Sutton plugged in and filling it this year because he's now in Detroit. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, what else do we have here, Dave, in terms of the email machine?
Okay, let's see here. I lost my spot. Eric writes in, gentlemen, greetings from San Diego. First of all, San Diego, man, I want to get back there real quick because there is this, what was it? I think it was a Pacific, one of these fish markets over there. I wish I could remember the name right off the top. You would think I'd have it on the tip of my tongue there, but man, amazing fish over there that we really enjoyed dining with. So moving on from my tour guide What's that name of that company that does all those tours that you can sign up for? I forget. Anyway, greetings from San Diego. Like all other emailers, I love and actively promote everything Yins do. Also, not missed a single podcast in over 10 years and can remember arranging my work days around the 11 a.m. Pacific time airings of the Terrible Podcast.
Thank you.
So we appreciate that. As Alex alluded to on the Wednesday podcast, I wonder if we are all missing the boat when it comes to the tackle position the Steelers might draft. To the point, do they value Dan Moore Jr. more than we all do, or perhaps even more than they value Chukwuma Okorafor? And per dollar paid, are they right? The tackles they seem to be most interested in project more as right tackles than left tackles, but the confusion with that has been centered around why would they want to shuffle the offensive line by then moving Chooks back to left tackle and plugging in the blank pick at right tackle. But what if the plan is instead to replace the $10 million per season Chooks with a rookie? Your thoughts? He says, keep on kicking all of your competitors, if you even consider them that. But nice email, Eric. We appreciate that. And look, that we are. I told my wife we're going to get back over to San Diego there fairly soon. To, if anything, visit that restaurant. Look, you make good points here, Eric, overall. And I think that's a lot of where personally my hang up has been when it comes to the tackle class specifically this year and what the Steelers might do. Darnell Wright, he has played a little bit of left tackle, but it seems at the NFL level best suited at right tackle. You have DeJuan Jones that's specifically been a right tackle. Can he move over there? Who else? Alex?
I mean, they've looked at both. I mean, looked at, Broderick Jones came in,
right.
Anton Harrison came in. Those were left tackles. They didn't bring in Paris Johnson, but they were at the pro day. So was Pat Myers. So they've looked at both, I would say, the top end left and right tackles. Really all the top offensive tackles in general, they've been investigating.
I'll tell you this about Chooks. He unless they trade him, which I think would be foolish right now, he's not going anywhere, and especially once he got past his roster bonus date. Chooks is, they didn't sign him last offseason to the contract they did to deal him away, in my opinion there. He is going to play. He's going to start the season at one of the two tackle spots there. I'm 99.9% sure of that, barring injury there. We have had discussions that do they value Dan Moore Jr. more than the rest of us do?
I would say yes to they value Okorafor and more than the vast majority of Steelers Nation. And that's, I think, the reason why they're looking at the top end guys. They're basically sitting there saying, okay, if we can get a top end type of dude, Jones, Johnson, Wright, whoever, then we're going to look at that. But if we can't do that, they've not done really any homework on the mid-round tackles or later round tackles. They may end up taking one at some point, but the focus has been on the top end of this class. And so I think that's the way they've approached this thing. Okorafor is going to start this year. Could they look towards replacing him for next year? That's possible. But if you're going to draft a tackle early, generally speaking, they're getting on the field early. They're not guys that are going to sit and wait around and come off the bench and start in year two. So that's kind of been the point that I've wrestled with.
Okay, let's see. Moving right along here, we have Blake writes in. Hi, Alex and Dave. First, thank you for the great content. Because of your podcast and posts that I have fewer football questions every day, and your podcast has made the offseason most enjoyable part. Thank you for that. How does the drafting of players impact the time of cutting of players on the back end of the roster, especially in regard to this year's draft? He says if the Steelers draft Darnell Washington, Mayer, or Kincaid at 32 or 49, does that mean Gentry will be released early in this offseason or at final cutdown? Same with Benton and Montravius Adams or Tippmann and Green. Is it just a courtesy thing, a contract thing, blah, blah, blah? Could you give some examples of who might get cut early if the Steelers address that position early in the draft, and who would stay on the roster until the last possible moment? Great question, Blake from Baltimore. I get where he's coming from on this. I think you look at guys that could perceivably be cut not long after the draft I think really you could probably or be gone in one way, shape, or form, not but during the draft or not long after the draft. I think you have two names there. I think it's a Keller Witherspoon and it's Kevin Dotson there. I envision Dotson not being a cut more so than potentially a trade guy. Witherspoon, because of that $4 million salary, if they were to draft a guy in the first round, let's say like Porter or Banks or whoever, I think there's a possibility of him being cut. And it's mostly tied to that $4 million salary, because do you want to take a guy that more than likely not going to make your 53-man roster with a $4 million salary and risk him getting hurt through the offseason activities there? Those are the two that I have circled that potentially might not be Steelers not long after the draft. Now, when you look at guys like Gentry, guys like Montravius Adams, guys like Kendrick Green, Gunnar Olszewski, throw out some more names for me, Alex. I think that's
kind of the list. Yeah.
Right. Those guys, regardless of what you do in the draft, I think still hold on through the bulk of the offseason because injuries do happen. And it's not like those guys are killing you from a salary standpoint, that if you cut them right after the draft with the roster displacement and what you actually save in cap space, it makes more sense to hold on to those guys regardless of the draft picks than it does to send them out the door right after that. And look, there can't be anybody that listens to this podcast that thinks Kendrick Green's going to make the 53-man roster. However, you don't have that much invested with him that you could give him at least the summer as a body, an experienced body, to compete throughout the offseason there. And he's got a low capture, low base salary and all like that. So I think the guys that you're looking at that could potentially be out the door not long after the draft occurs is Kevin Dotson via maybe a trade, or Witherspoon being gone via a flat out contract termination.
You said it well, Dave. I don't really have anything else to add. I agree with everything that you said. But yeah, for the cheaper guys like Gentry, like Green, you do need a 90-man roster. You need depth. God forbid you get into camp and preseason have a rash of injuries at one position. Somebody goes down, especially at tight end. You lose one of those guys. The whole landscape, changes. Obviously, you're carrying typically only 3. So you carry those guys just because they're not, hurting you financially, and there's some experience, some competition that brings the best out in the rookie. Make sure that they're on their toes and they're fighting hard for their role and their spot. So, at Witherspoon, could be Dotson, could be trade wise. Maybe you get that odd, at a rookie minicamp type of cut, but generally, if you're cheap, then you're going to be held on to.
James Cicinelli writes in, a great podcast website. In your Tyler Muse article about his contract, it was noted that played on the league minimum contract last season and logged 70 snaps on defense and 325 on special teams. He says, I wonder who is giving you the most bang for your buck. He says, I think you can't really compare special teams snaps versus offense or defense snaps, because obviously you don't have as many special team snaps in a game, and that players playing special teams sometimes are cheaper. But I think it would be interesting to see the value of different players' positions of their cost per snap. Like how overpaid was Derek Watt? He says, was he the highest cost per snap of the special teamers that didn't really offer much of any other value except random short yardage carries? And obviously, if you could whittle down your cost per snap on special teams with players like Tyler Muse, then that opens up money for other positions. I get where you're coming from. And I think really overall, maybe what you're trying to get out here is the fact that Derek Watt didn't carry his value per dollar. And once again, it's not his fault his cap charge was so high, because there was a restructure in there that made his cap charge swell up a little bit there. But even his regular base salary, you could make an argument that he was overpaid to be a special teams ace. I get it. I understand the consternation that people have with that. But in the flip side too, better special teams players normally cost you a little bit more money overall. Now, Tanner Muse here with the contract that he signed is a minimum contract. So obviously if he makes the team and gives you 300 special team snaps, it doesn't matter what he gives you on the defensive side of the ball, which we all hope is next to nothing or nothing there. So I don't know entirely where you're going here, other than to maybe say that Derek Watt has been overpaid for the last couple of years. And in a sense, you would not be wrong there.
Yeah, it's not breaking any news about that he was getting paid a lot and wasn't offering much outside of special teams. I have not done a value chart in terms of, cost per snap and those kinds of things. I haven't, taken the time. It would take a lot of research and effort to do that. But, point taken on that, but just the recognition that this team needs to have, quality special teamers, and they lost a lot. And some of those guys may come back in Snell and Boykin, but there's been a pretty big turnover there in terms of your core special teams guys. And so that's why you're happy to see a Muse come in. And there's going to be some spots there at the end of this roster come camp. The guys trying to fill some of those gaps that were held by Spillane and Snell, potentially Boykin, those kinds of things. And so you may, you talk about roster battles and you focus on offense and defense, but the last 2-3 guys on the roster might be fighting to replace some of those, very valuable and pretty significant special team snaps that were lost.
Right. Let's see here. What else? I think we got all that. Oh, one other name I was going to add to that list of Montravius Adams, Gunnar Olszewski. Who else did I have on there? Gentry. Those kind of guys there. How safe is Miles Killebrew?
Yeah, I wouldn't put his name in pen, but again, just talking about the core special teamers, do you want to turn that over again? We'll have to see what this team has in terms of safeties, free agency, undrafted, draft picks. But he's been, I know he wasn't, as flashy in terms of special teams play because he had the 2-block punt. Right. Sometimes that's just based off scheme and just kind of opportunity. He's certainly, I think, safe-ish right now just because of that resume, but there's no guarantee that he's going to make this team.
All right. Appreciate all the emails there. Appreciate the guys sitting on the round table. You got anything else to get us out of here, Alex?
Nope. I know it was a longer show today, but we had the round table we wanted to get to. So Dave and I will come back on Monday.
And you had about 17 minutes of me talking hypotheticals related to one player in a cap charge.
We love you for it.
All right. In the meantime, until Monday, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button or hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar and follow the directions that way. Great job by everybody today. Hope you enjoyed the show. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.